Welcome to the Special Forces in World War II podcast, transmitting on this frequency. This broadcast is your dedicated channel for comprehensive intelligence regarding World War II Special Forces operations. Our transmissions encompass in-depth analysis of their strategic maneuvers, cutting-edge equipment, illustrious biographies, and an array of pertinent subjects. The orchestration of these transmissions is executed by the expert team of the Special Forces in World War II website, a squad deeply immersed in the historical theatre. For further insights, visual aids, and captured moments frozen in time, navigate to our virtual headquarters at worldwar2-soft.com. Your immersion into the front lines of knowledge awaits. Over and out. Welcome back to another episode of the Special Forces in World War II podcast, where we explore the bold, the daring, and the extraordinary tactics that help shape the outcome of the greatest conflict in modern history. I'm your host, Michael Wires, and as always, we're here to unravel the hidden stories behind the daring exploits of World War II. Today, we delve into the extraordinary journey of the Special Raiding Squadron, the elite force spearheading daring amphibious assaults and sabotage missions across enemy territory. In this episode, we follow their preparation for one of the most significant operations of the war, Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of Sicily. In the spring of 1943, after months of grueling missions in the North African desert, the men of the Special Raiding Squadron find themselves boarding a train in Egypt, bound for an unknown destination. What awaits them is a sleepy Palestinian village called Azib, where their transformation into an elite amphibious raiding force begins. From beach assaults to cliff climbing under the cover of darkness, the squadron hones their skills in preparation for what lies ahead. Under the leadership of the formidable Paddy Mayne, this tight-knit band of warriors would soon find themselves in the thick of the action, tasked with scaling the cliffs of Sicily's Maddalena Peninsula to neutralize the formidable Lamba Doria coastal battery. Their mission? To pave the way for the Allied landings at Syracuse. But before they set foot on Sicilian soil, they must endure intense physical trials, including a brutal 77-kilometer forced march through the hills of Palestine, a foretaste of the challenges that lie ahead. Along the way, they encounter missteps, mischief, and moments of levity, from night marches under the blazing desert sun to rowdy bar brawls in Jerusalem. The story of the Special Raiding Squadron is one of relentless preparation, brotherhood, and a single-minded determination to succeed, no matter the cost. So, grab your gear and join us as we trace their path to the beaches of Sicily, where the fate of the Mediterranean hangs in the balance. This is the Special Forces in World War II podcast. Let's start at the beginning. In early April 1943, the Special Raiding Squadron departs from Egypt, bound for Azib, Palestine. The journey lasts over 40 hours, slow and uneventful. The squadron arrives at approximately 2 a.m., disembarking in complete darkness onto a grassy verge alongside the railway tracks. There is no station, and the men, disoriented and fatigued, face confusion during the unloading process. However, transport from the advance party arrives shortly after, bringing some order as the men are ferried to the camp. Eventually, they locate a tent and settle in for rest. The next morning, the troops wake late and survey their surroundings. About 800 meters away, the Mediterranean Sea stretches to the horizon, while the coast road runs parallel to the camp, bordered by orange groves. This landscape, lush and green, offers a stark contrast to the arid deserts of Egypt. Inland, The rolling hills of Palestine rise beyond a 2-kilometer strip of cultivated land. The camp sits atop a hill, with cookhouses and mess areas clustered at its center. Tents housing the men are neatly arranged down the slopes, divided by troop. Situated 32 kilometers north of Haifa and 5 kilometers south of the Syrian border, the camp overlooks the small village of Azib to the north and the Jewish holiday town of Nahariya to the south. By midday, all officers are called to a briefing, where training procedures are outlined. Although the exact details and duration remain unspecified, the officers are informed that training must begin from the basics due to the varying experience levels within the squadron. As a result, all personnel are required to undergo a second round of foundational training before progressing to specialist skills. A new organizational structure is also introduced. Each troop is divided into 3 sections, further split into 2 subsections led by a corporal or lance sergeant. Every subsection consists of 3 three-man teams, a light machine gun party, a rifle party, and a rifle bomber party. This configuration ensures that each subsection can operate independently as an effective fighting unit. At this point, the Special Raiding Squadron consists of 18 officers and 262 enlisted personnel. The headquarters is led by Major Main as commander, with Major Leia serving as second in command. Captain Francis manages administrative duties, while Captain Gunn fulfills the role of medical officer. Captain Malott is responsible for intelligence, and Captain Muirhead commands the mortar platoon, which includes 28 men. The unit's chaplain, Captain Robert Lunt, has recently been appointed. Number 1 Troop operates under the leadership of Major Fraser, supported by Captain Wilson and Lieutenants Riley and Wiseman, who each command a section. Captain Pote directs Number 2 Troop, with Captains Marsh and Lieutenants Davis and Harrison in charge of sections. Number 3 Troop falls under the command of Captain Barnby, assisted by Captain Lepine and Lieutenants Gurman and Tonkin as section leaders. Additionally, a small contingent of Royal Engineers is attached to the squadron, providing essential technical support. Training takes place near the beach, across a narrow band of sand dunes and scrubland separating the cultivated areas from the sea. The terrain, rugged and intersected by a coastal railway, provides ample cover and natural features for firing practice. Its proximity to the camp, a 5-minute march away, allows for easy access. The initial month focuses on physical fitness, weapons drills, and equipment familiarization. Gradually, the troops receive a full complement of arms and ammunition, with loads distributed among individuals according to their roles. While Raiding Forces Headquarters supervises the administrative aspects of the training, the Special Raiding Squadron retains operational independence under the leadership of Paddy Main. Main insists on direct control over all squadron activities. During this period, key figures such as Bill Fraser rejoin the unit, along with Sergeant Johnny Cooper, who had previously escaped capture after an operation with David Sterling. Cooper and Sergeant Mike Sadler returned to Allied lines on foot, surviving hostile encounters along the way. Officers gain valuable experience by closely observing and assisting their sections during the early training phases. Veteran non-commissioned officers, including Sergeant Andy Story, Corporal Bill McNinch, and Corporal Bill Mitchell, provide essential guidance to newer officers. Their leadership and experience play a critical role in maintaining discipline and morale. After a month of intensive training, the squadron achieves the required standards in basic skills, prompting a shift to advanced exercises. Physical endurance remains a key focus, culminating in a 72-kilometer forced march from Lake Tiberias, located 183 meters below sea level, across the coastal hills and back to camp. Each troop undertakes the march independently. Number 3. Troop, the first to set off, struggles with the terrain, with only 8 men completing the march. Number 1 troop performs better, although they take a wrong turn and return after nearly 48 hours. For the remaining troops, the march begins in the midday heat. The initial leg involves climbing through dense cornfields, pausing frequently due to exhaustion. By evening, the march resumes, continuing through villages and along steep, winding roads. Singing provides some motivation, and the troops manage to cover 32 kilometers overnight. At dawn, the men rest near a Palestine police barracks, having marched 51 kilometers in 18 hours. Although 5 or 6 drop out, the majority press on, enduring blistered feet and sore muscles. The final stretch proves the most grueling, with a riverbed softening their feet and increasing the pain. Despite this, they complete the remaining 5 kilometers under the scorching sun, arriving at camp after 26 hours of continuous movement. This march foreshadows the arduous training ahead. Shortly thereafter, officers and a dozen men are dispatched to Jerusalem for the Grant Taylor revolver course. Bob Merlot, the intelligence officer, oversees the course, while Sergeant Sandy Wilson, known for his clumsy but good-natured manner, provides comic relief. One evening, a soldier confronts an officer over unauthorized parachute insignia. The incident lands the soldier in the guardhouse, though the officer is later exposed as an imposter. Upon their return, the camp is abuzz with preparations. General Dempsey visits, announcing the squadron's role in an upcoming amphibious assault to secure a coastal battery in Sicily. Training intensifies, focusing on silent cliff climbing, marksmanship, and coordinated assault drills. The use of horses and mules is introduced, though enthusiasm fades after a strenuous day of riding. By mid-May, the troops rehearse the assault plan repeatedly until it becomes second nature. Competitions in shooting enhance skill and morale. Live-fire exercises add realism, though an incident involving tracer rounds draws unwanted attention from Allied aircraft, resulting in a reprimand. Mortar training, led by Alec Muirhead, advances rapidly despite his initial lack of experience. Practical improvisations refine tactics, and the troops demonstrate readiness for the operation. On June 6, 1943, the Special Raiding Squadron departs Azib, their mission undisclosed. The final night sees celebrations and last-minute trips to Haifa, but all personnel report for duty at the station by dawn. As the train departs, the men remain confident in their preparation, ready for the challenges that lie ahead. The Special Raiding Squadron assembles at dawn in Suez, with no knowledge of their destination. Upon arrival, they linger on the platform for hours, speculating about their next move. Their suspicions of imminent deployment grow when orders confirm a transfer to a ship, signaling an impending voyage. By tender, the men board the HMS Ulster Monarch, a sleek 3,000-ton steamer, once a passenger ferry between England and Northern Ireland. Now converted into a landing ship infantry, she carries 6 fully equipped landing craft assault. The white ensign flutters above her, giving the vessel an air of military precision, far removed from her civilian past. Unbeknownst to the troops, the HMS Ulster Monarch will be their base for the next 5 weeks, offering relative comfort compared to crowded troop ships. The ship's naval crew, officers, and ratings integrate smoothly with the soldiers, fostering mutual respect and cooperation. Each officer receives a private cabin, while the men settle into spacious mess decks. A week later, Number 3 troop transfers to the Dunera, further easing conditions aboard. Time in Suez is spent reviewing aerial reconnaissance photos and refining operational details. Mornings focus on physical training and weapons inspection, while afternoons are dedicated to operational briefings and embarkation drills. The landing craft are lowered opposite the ship's embarkation points, and the men practice boarding under simulated combat conditions. The crews, veterans from HMS Saunders, display confidence and familiarity, reassuring the soldiers that they will reach shore safely when the time comes. Lowering the landing craft in rough seas poses a challenge. Precision is vital to prevent accidents during embarkation. Though the crafts appear fragile, their 3-ton frame, twin engines, and light armor prove otherwise. Each carries up to 30 troops with crew, offering protection from small arms fire and navigating shallow waters with a minimal draft of 0.6 meters. Drills intensify as troops rehearse disembarkation on hostile shores. Each section secures designated positions aboard the craft to ensure rapid deployment upon landing. Repeated exercises ingrain the process into muscle memory, ensuring cohesion under fire. A full-scale rehearsal follows in Aqaba, a rugged area at the northern end of the Gulf of Aqaba. The men depart under operational conditions, with maps and aerial images reinforcing the objective. Arriving at night, they disembark silently, scaling a steep hill to simulate an assault on a gun battery. The harsh terrain slows progress, but the men advance unseen. Near the summit, the order for a full-speed charge breaks the silence, catching the defenders unprepared. Despite confusion and exhaustion, the troops secure the objective and descend at dawn. Returning to Suez, the troops face a 3-week wait. General Montgomery inspects the unit, recognizing them as veterans of desert operations. His speech commends their contribution to the North African campaign, though his praise is met with reserved enthusiasm until his departure. Training continues, punctuated by a nighttime endurance march. Patty Main leads the column, maintaining a relentless pace. Benzedrine is trialed on select troops, boosting morale and energy. The march, though physically taxing, sharpens the men's stamina for upcoming operations. In the final week, the squadron rehearses an attack on a coastal anti-aircraft battery. Number 3 troop cuts the road, while the remaining forces flank from the beach, catching the defenders by surprise. The exercise concludes successfully, reinforcing the effectiveness of their tactics. As deployment nears, anticipation builds. Officers frequently join Main for impromptu nighttime briefings, blending social gatherings with operational planning. His charismatic leadership fosters unity and confidence. At last, the ships begin moving. The HMS Ulster Monarch enters the Suez Canal, prompting relief among the men. Familiar landmarks along the banks prompt nostalgic farewells as the convoy progresses. By afternoon, they reach Port Said, joining a vast fleet of troop ships and escort vessels. The scale of the operation becomes clear as ships gather in formation. The day passes quickly, and by the afternoon, they arrive at Port Said. Here, they find a large fleet of liners, cargo ships, and escort vessels assembled, all presumably headed for the same mission. It is only now that they begin to understand the scale of the operation. Around them are massive ships, fully packed with troops and landing craft, ready for deployment. The Navy is active, with corvettes, destroyers, and landing craft busily moving around. Port Said is much smaller than Suez, which makes the packed ships and tight formation all the more impressive, underscoring the size of the invasion fleet. The next day, they are informed that the entire invasion force will be allowed ashore, instead of staying aboard all day. For security reasons, this is done in an organized manner, though the effort involved seems hardly worth it. Badges, decorations, and regimental insignias are removed, though it seems unlikely the Germans would be particularly interested in individual unit identifications. Marching through Port Said, the troops feel like they are simply drawing attention to their presence and strength, essentially advertising the invasion force. The only explanation they come up with is that Montgomery must be so confident in the mission's success that he doesn't mind if the enemy knows they are coming. The sight is impressive, a seemingly endless line of units from different nations marching through the palm-lined streets of Port Said. Locals gather to watch, and the troops wonder what they might be thinking. They speculate if someone is secretly transmitting messages to Germany as they parade through the city. After some confusion and a long wait for a ferry, they eventually make it back to the HMS Ulster Monarch and the troop ship HMT Dunera. From that point, the atmosphere shifts to one of tension and anticipation. The men know the wait is almost over. The next morning, on July 5th, 1943, at 11 o'clock, they leave the harbor, heading out into the Mediterranean. They are far from alone, as ships ahead and astern maneuver into formation. Once in convoy, they begin moving along the Egyptian coast towards their still unknown objective. Once at sea, the destination is no longer a secret. They are given a small blue booklet containing everything a soldier or tourist might need to know about Sicily, the stepping stone to Europe. Many had already suspected Sicily was the target, and now, with the booklet in hand, the pieces fall into place. From the map, they learn their landing site is a foot-shaped promontory on the southeastern coast of Sicily, about 8 kilometers south of Syracuse, which is one of the initial targets. Officers are summoned for a final briefing, and last-minute aerial photos are distributed. The ship turns into a hive of activity as everyone realizes that time is running out. The photos are scrutinized both individually and collectively, and a relief model of the objective area is passed around the sections. Back in Azib, they had planned and rehearsed the general attack strategy, which is now refined down to the smallest detail, from troop to section, section to subsection, and down to individual soldiers. Each man knows his role, his expected position, and which flank to cover. The operation is so meticulously planned that it could proceed without a single order once they land and begin the assault on the gun positions. The photo analysis is very thorough, almost too thorough, leading to conflicting interpretations. One particular mark on a photo causes debate, and nobody can determine what it is. A figure nearby is studied. If running away, it might indicate an ammunition dump. If running towards, possibly an air raid shelter, but they can't agree which direction the figure is moving. Later, they find that the mysterious object was nothing more than a haystack. On the practical side, the troops are also busy. Equipment is sorted and distributed evenly, weapons cleaned and loaded, grenades primed, and protective coverings prepared for gear to withstand seawater. Various improvisations are made, oiled silk for valuables, and rubber items to protect weapon muzzles and watches. After final checks and fittings, they are ready. Each man is given an inflatable Mae West lifebelt, in case they have to swim, an unsettling thought given they are each carrying almost 36 kilograms of gear. With preparations finished, there is nothing left to do but wait and discuss the operation. The scene around them is deceptively peaceful. The sun shines on the calm blue-green Mediterranean, and the Libyan coast appears faintly on the horizon. Ships steadily advance towards the enemy shores, hoping to remain undetected. The hope for a surprise landing lingers, though they doubt it is possible, given the scale of the operation. A single enemy aircraft could easily compromise the mission. During the 5-day voyage, tension mounts, with anxious glances frequently cast skyward, hoping enemy planes stay away. The tension peaks as they pass Crete, knowing the threat is highest there. But miraculously, they remain unnoticed. There is a report that a 4-engine reconnaissance plane, possibly a Fokker-Wulf, flew over, but there is no attack. Later, they learn that the Special Boat Squadron had been tasked with raiding Crete to keep enemy aircraft grounded, likely the reason for their safe passage. Sailing towards Sicily is uncomfortable, and waiting for battle is the hardest part. Anxiety and inactivity dominate their minds. It is difficult to resist dark thoughts, and fear of the unknown takes hold. They wonder who among them might not return. Letters and photographs are packed away, perhaps for the last time. The uncertainties ahead consume their thoughts. The troops understand the task ahead. Sicily is considered the best fortified island in the Mediterranean, and they are assigned to breach its defenses at one of the strongest points. They know the assault will be tough, and many accept that some of them will not make it back. However, their rigorous training has given them confidence in their abilities, and they are determined to prove themselves against the enemy. Final briefings ensue, with officers scrutinizing aerial reconnaissance. Equipment is distributed, weapons cleaned, and grenades primed. Each soldier dons an inflatable Mae West life vest, mindful of the weight they will carry ashore. The squadron braces for the landing, aware of the formidable defenses awaiting them. Letters and keepsakes are stored, and the reality of combat looms large. With determination and trust in their training, the men press forward, ready for the invasion of Sicily. The Maddalena Peninsula, positioned south of Syracuse in Sicily, features a rugged and rocky coastline. The terrain varies significantly along its length, presenting distinct challenges for an amphibious assault. To the west, near Terrauzza, lies a flat, stony beach offering a feasible landing site from the sea. In stark contrast, the cliffs towards the eastern end at Cape Muro di Porco rise dramatically to heights of 15 to 20 meters, with undercut bases that render them formidable and difficult to scale. Between Cape Muro di Porco and Terrauzza Beach, the cliffs display alternating formations, sheer vertical faces, interspersed with sections where the rocks descend closer to sea level. In these lower areas, the ground ascends steeply in layered steps or bluffs, leading towards the central ridgeline of the peninsula. Among the rocky heights near the cape, approximately 200 to 300 meters from the cliff edge, remains of the Lamba Doria gun battery are still visible. Named after a historic Italian naval figure, this battery formed a crucial part of the defensive network guarding the Sicilian coast during the Allied invasion of 1943. The Special Raiding Squadron receives orders to scale the cliffs along the Sicilian shore and neutralize the Lamba Doria battery. The operation is meticulously planned to ensure the squadron lands 800 meters west of the target. This strategic choice minimizes immediate exposure to enemy fire by utilizing lower cliffs further from the primary defenses. It also facilitates the blocking of the sole access road leading to the battery, preventing Italian reinforcements from launching a counterattack on the Special Raiding Squadron from the rear during the main assault. The attack plan assigns No. 3 Troop to land at the westernmost point, advancing northwards to secure the road and seize Masseria de Mario, a nearby farmstead. Parallel to them, the mortar troop is to land and establish firing positions along the ridgeline. Number 2 troop is tasked with encircling the battery from the north, while Number 1 troop conducts a direct frontal assault from the west. This deployment is carefully structured to coordinate a multi-directional assault while cutting off the enemy's routes for reinforcement or retreat. Allied units operating nearby receive information on the Special Raiding Squadron's positions to mitigate the risk of friendly fire incidents during the engagement. Upon achieving their objective, the Special Raiding Squadron is instructed to follow one of 2 courses of action. A. Return directly to HMS Ulster Monarch by signaling for landing craft at a pre-designated embarkation site. B. Advance west to rendezvous with the 5th Infantry Division, which is pushing northwards from Beach 44 towards Syracuse. The primary withdrawal point is identified near the flat shoreline at Terrauzza, situated at the base of the Maddalena Peninsula. This location not only provides an accessible exit route by sea, but also connects to the nearest road network leading inland. Depending on the operational situation, the Special Raiding Squadron can either reboard the Ulster Monarch or proceed overland to link up with advancing British forces on the main highway en route to Syracuse. Ultimately, the course of action is left to the discretion of the commanding officer, based on the conditions encountered on the ground. The overriding priority is to regroup the Special Raiding Squadron aboard HMS Ulster Monarch for reorganization and redeployment in subsequent maritime operations. In the event of hostile engagements during the withdrawal, the squadron is authorized to neutralize enemy batteries or defensive positions, provided such actions fall within their operational capabilities. On July 9, 1943, a shipwide announcement pulls everyone back to reality. The navigator's calm voice announces, "If you look out to starboard, you can see the summit of Mount Etna, Sicily's highest mountain." The sight of the volcano's cone rising above the clouds brings home the realization that this is not an exercise, this is the real invasion. By 1600 hours, the sea becomes choppy. Earlier, the Mediterranean had been calm, but now the wind has risen, and the waves grow larger. Seasickness begins affecting some of the men. By nightfall, the wind is a full gale, and the HMS Ulster Monarch and the troopship HMT Dunera pitch violently. The prospect of boarding landing craft and heading for shore under these conditions adds to their unease. As darkness falls, tension builds. They are just hours away from the invasion. The ship rolls, seasickness takes hold. But by 1 a.m., the ship slows, and they switch to invasion lighting. The atmosphere becomes eerie, lit by dim, pale lights. They gather in the mess, forcing down bacon and eggs with hot coffee to stave off nausea. At 2 a.m., they prepare to embark. The order comes over the loudspeaker, and they head to their boat stations. Despite the nerves, the familiarity of the routine is reassuring. Through the open doors, they see the dark, rough sea. The sailors struggle to lower the boats due to the waves, and the men wait for what feels like an eternity. Finally, the order to embark is given. The men move forward, helping one another into the landing craft. Weighed down by their gear and weakened by seasickness, it is a difficult process, but the sailors assist them. Suddenly, there is a splash and a shout of, "Man overboard!" One of the soldiers has fallen in, but is quickly rescued and returned to his boat. Lowering the craft into the sea is tricky, but thanks to the skill of the landing craft assault crew, they manage it without incident and move away from the ship. Once formed up, they begin the 5-kilometer journey to shore, their landing site barely visible as a low, dark line. The sea remains rough, and waves and spray drench them. Many shiver, seasick and cold, using the cardboard buckets provided. After about 30 minutes, the sea becomes calmer as they approach the shelter of the shore, and some of the men recover slightly. In the darkness, they approach the shore, nerves on edge. A searchlight sweeps the sea, raising concern, but the roar of engines and the crump of bombs reveal that their bombers are distracting the defenders. The searchlight swings skyward, chasing aircraft, and the men breathe a collective sigh of relief. They watch as bombs strike the target, while the anti-aircraft fire tries and fails to find the bombers. The night is calm, with only the sound of waves as the landing craft move closer to the Sicilian shore. Suddenly, the silence is broken by a loud commotion nearby. Though still about 180 meters from the coast, the noise seems very close. In the dim light, approximately 20 meters away, they spot a low, dark shape with torches flashing and men shouting. Panic briefly sets in as they fear they have been discovered by an enemy E-boat. Their hearts pound, believing that their end is near in their defenseless state. However, relief quickly replaces fear as they realize the voices are shouting in English, and quite colorfully at that. They halt to investigate and discover that it is one of their own gliders that has crashed in the sea. One of the boats picks up the remaining survivors, a small and disheartening number, and they continue their slow and quiet journey towards the shore. Somehow, the noise from the glider crash has not alerted the enemy, and the men feel fortunate for their continued luck. The landing craft bumps gently onto the shore, and they disembark, executing the landing drills they have practiced many times before. After assembling on the beach, they move towards the cliffs ahead. However, these are not true cliffs. After a short climb of about 1.5 meters, the terrain gradually rises in rocky steps and boulders, allowing them to reach the top without difficulty. Once there, they wait, as trained, and quickly establish contact with Captain Harry Pote at No. 3 Troop Headquarters. He orders them to stay put while he contacts the rest of the unit. They lie low, waiting for further instructions. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cuts through the air, followed by the dull thud of a mortar bomb. Saunders cries out in pain, and word spreads that he has been wounded. Concerned, they check on him, finding that a bomb fragment has cut his hand. Saunders insists on staying. He refuses any suggestion of being evacuated. Mortar bombs continue to fall, but they soon realize that these are from their own side. Alec MacDonald, with his mortar section, must have arrived minutes earlier and immediately started engaging targets. His second round hits directly, igniting ammunition and dry grass, conveniently illuminating the entire area. The troops of the Special Raiding Squadron land approximately 800 meters east of the planned assault point, directly below the battery, in what was considered the most hazardous area. No. 1 Troop and No. 2 Troop, the main assault force, land southwest of the battery, while No. 3 Troop and the Mortar Troop land further west, where the landing is originally intended. The unplanned landing locations of No. 1 Troop and No. 2 Troop places them in danger from both the Italian defenders and friendly fire. The pylon, meant to be on the southwest corner of the two troops, should have been almost out of sight to their right if they had landed correctly. As No. 1 Troop and No. 2 Troop end up much closer to the battery than planned, this results in significant confusion. They conclude they have touched down too far east, placing them directly below the battery. The lack of enemy resistance at such a critical spot further confirms their unplanned landing. To their left, the steady, slow bursts of a Bren gun can be heard, then silence returns, interrupted only by the intermittent thump of Alec Muirhead's 3-inch mortar section mortar fire. There is still no sign of the enemy until they hear a pitiful wailing, a sound like a small child crying for his mother. It is an Italian soldier, evidently struck by the realization that enemy forces are now within 90 meters of him, and that the noise is not an isolated glider landing, but part of a larger invasion. For about 10 minutes, they remain in position, listening to the distant sounds of battle, but with no sign of Captain Pote's number. 3rd Troop. Unsure of his whereabouts and feeling frustrated at being left behind, they decide to take matters into their own hands. Given their off-target landing, they doubt Captain Pote has stuck to the original plan, which involved detouring to the west to attack from the north. Confident in the lack of opposition, they decide to move directly towards the gun battery, now visible and illuminated by the mortar section. Upon cresting a small rise, they encounter a long, low barbed wire fence. Just ahead, they spot silhouettes of troops, which they recognize as friendly. Approaching them, they find it is Johnny Wiseman's section from No. 1 Troop. Realizing the mix-up, they quickly climb over the wire, anxious about possible booby traps or hidden machine guns. The urgency causes an unfortunate mishap, with one soldier tearing his trousers on the wire, resulting in a rather drafty situation. Once across, they find themselves alone again, as Wiseman's section disappears into the night. Moving in extended line across an exposed area, the first bursts of enemy fire begin. Red tracer rounds streak towards their objective, intensifying in volume. The answering green tracers from the enemy are sporadic and weak. "Sir, I don't think we should move any further unless you want us all killed," Corporal Mitchell advises calmly. As an experienced veteran, he recognizes the danger of the near misses. The lieutenant, still inexperienced, hesitates but eventually agrees with Mitchell. They come across another wire obstacle, even more formidable, and wisely choose to take cover behind a low bank they find nearby. Taking up defensive positions, they prepare to provide support where needed and to block any potential enemy escape from the battery's southern side. Mortar fire ceases and a storm of bullets passes overhead. The lieutenant silently thanks Corporal Mitchell for his advice. Otherwise, they surely would have taken casualties. They have no doubt that the fire they hear is from their own side, confirmed by the occasional burst of a Mills bomb and the faint sound of English voices. The noise gradually dies down, and they see figures moving through the enemy positions, sporadically firing or throwing grenades into dark corners. Recognizing the voice of Sergeant Chalky White, a sergeant from No. 1 Troop, the lieutenant shouts the password. "Desert rats," he calls. "Kill the Italians," comes the prompt reply, and they climb over the wire into the gun position to join their comrades from No. 1 Troop. A quick survey reveals that Captain Bill Fraser, commander of No. 1 Troop, has kept his earlier promise to Harry that he would not be content with just capturing the camp buildings and leaving the guns to No. 2 Troop. Instead, No. 1 Troop pressed straight on to take the battery. The change of plan came directly from Paddy Mayne, who, realizing the enemy's weakness, decided to seize the objective immediately, abandoning the original strategy. As they arrive at the scene, they find No. 1 Troop busy clearing the area. In the pale dawn light, they see groups of Italians standing under guard, visibly shivering. Some of the men are gathered around an air raid shelter entrance from which noises emanate. After repeated threats and some persuasive small arms fire, the occupants are coaxed out, clearly relieved to be alive. Some are wounded, and much to their surprise, women and children emerge as well. The sight of these civilians, shabby, dirty, and ingratiating, is a stark contrast to the tough, fanatical defenders they had expected. In the midst of the activity stands Paddy Mayne, calm and evidently pleased with their success. They have taken this important position without losing a single man. Paddy inquires about Harry Pote and the rest of Number 2 Troop, and although it is uncomfortable to admit they do not know, Paddy seems unconcerned. He signals their success by firing 3 green, very lights, and Harry Pote's group arrives 10 minutes later, having stuck to the original plan of attacking from the north. The lieutenant and his section sit in one of the gun pits, resting and lighting cigarettes, finally able to relax. With dawn breaking, the men grow more confident, and discussions begin about their unexpectedly easy success. Mayne soon orders the troops to disperse and prepare the prisoners for transport. They need to move quickly before daylight fully arrives, allowing time to demolish the guns and signal their success to the fleet. The prisoners, already numbering over 200 within 45 minutes of landing, are gathered and marched down a nearby track. The Italians, now reduced to harmless captives, appear pitiful, dirty, diminutive men who had been bullies when in control but are now eager to please. Their reputation for treating prisoners cruelly does not sit well with the British troops, who remain cold towards their ingratiating behavior. With the prisoners moved, engineers set charges on the guns, and soon the area echoes with explosions as the artillery pieces are destroyed. Tony Andrews is tasked with sending the prearranged success signal to the fleet, 3 green rockets, but has some difficulty. The first 2 rockets topple over, scattering green sparks, and the third manages only a short spiral before falling back. Nonetheless, it appears sufficient for the ships offshore, as within minutes, the fleet begins steaming towards the shore. Watching the ships approach, the men feel a sense of pride, knowing their efforts have made this possible. As the sun rises, they get a better view of the previous night's events. They notice about a dozen small black patches floating on the water, gliders that had landed in the sea after being released too early. They estimate that at least 20 gliders went down in the water, possibly costing the lives of over 300 men who never got the chance to fight. Turning their attention inland, they take in the rocky, shrub-dotted landscape. Among the stunted olive trees and dusty fields, they spot another glider, wrecked against a stone wall, its back broken. As they regroup, more glider survivors, including a brigadier, are brought in, shivering and disoriented. They attach themselves to Paddy's headquarters, grateful to have been found. Soon after, the sound of approaching aircraft has the men diving for cover. A German Focke-Wulf 190 flies, low overhead, but passes without incident. They take up a defensive position near the coastal track leading to the battery, wondering what Mayne's next move will be. As they regroup at Masseria de Mario, a farm captured at the beginning of the operation. Suddenly, the sound of a distant gun makes them sit up. At first, they think it is artillery from their main forces inland, but then they see a plume of water rise near the fleet. An inland coastal battery has opened fire on their ships. Paddy immediately decides they must take out this new threat. Initially, it appears that Mayne decides to return to the ship, as HMS Ulster Monarch sends a signal to Corps headquarters at 0740 stating, SRS moving by craft to UM. This message suggests that the Special Raiding Squadron is already on board landing craft and heading back to the ship. Instead, the Special Raiding Squadron leaves Farm de Merio at approximately 0600 hours and moves inland towards a tall farm building they can see in the distance. This building turns out to be the observation post for the enemy battery. Most of the defenders have fled, and the few that remain are swiftly dealt with. Paddy establishes his headquarters there, and as the troops prepare to move on the battery, enemy fire ceases. The farm is Casamalia, located near the highest point of the ridge. Here, the men taking a brief rest, with one receiving water from a local resident, while others are still wearing inflatable life belts, suggesting that a sea journey remains a possibility. The farm at Casamalia provides a strategic view of the peninsula, including the location of Battery AS-493, situated roughly 1.6 kilometers away, with its prominent rangefinder tower visible. They soon realize that the building is under fire from their own destroyers, mistaken for an enemy position. Fortunately, they have a forward observation officer who quickly calls off the bombardment. The mortar teams under Captain Muirhead begin bombarding the battery. The mortar bombardment achieves effective hits on the target. The assault on the battery takes on a relaxed, almost casual air. The troops move forward with confidence, often exposing themselves to draw enemy fire and locate their positions. There is little resistance, and the Italians either flee or surrender when the British approach. Despite the sporadic fire, the men chew on pieces of grass or snack on tomatoes from the fields, pressing on with their advance. Eventually, they reach the battery to find it deserted. The officers' mess still contains personal belongings, which are swiftly appropriated, and the magazine, rigged with explosives but left untriggered, is discovered. The enemy had fled in such haste that they had not completed their preparations to destroy the site. The battery at AS-493 is equipped with both anti-aircraft and anti-ship guns. The rangefinder is mounted on a high turret to maximize visibility, with a fire control center positioned below. Captain Muirhead's mortar teams, having been instrumental during the attack on Lamba Doria, now demonstrate similar effectiveness in engaging AS-493. Mortar fire begins at a range of 1,700 meters from near Casamalia, with bursts visibly landing on the target. The mortar team advances 250 meters closer, managing to score a direct hit on the rangefinder tower. They continue moving forward, firing from a position just 250 meters away, with rounds successfully striking the gun pits. After the Italians discover that Lamba Doria has been overrun, the crew of AS-493 returns to the battery and help to prepare for close-quarters defense. Despite efforts to respond, the battery suffers casualties, and the fire control center takes multiple hits from mortar fire. At the same time, numbers 1 and 2 troop attack. Even though they encounter strong resistance, they are able to capture the gun position comprising 5 anti-aircraft guns, 75mm to 80mm, 1 large rangefinder, 4 4-inch mortars, and several machine guns. The guns are later identified as 102/35 anti-aircraft guns. The mention of 4-inch mortars is unusual, as gun batteries typically do not have such mortars. It is possible that the Special Raiding Squadron encountered a platoon of 81mm mortars belonging to the Italian 385th Coastal Battalion positioned nearby. Following the capture of AS-493, the Special Raiding Squadron advances to 2 additional batteries guarding the entrance to Syracuse Harbor. One of these, named Emanuele Russo, is captured by No. 1st Troop. They capture the gun position, including the battery commander and personnel. The final battery, numbered AS-309, consists of 6 76mm dual-purpose guns and is engaged by Muirhead's mortars, which achieve significant results, including setting a cordite dump on fire and forcing the enemy headquarters to evacuate. By midday, they settle into the shade of olive and walnut trees, resting while waiting for further orders. Their prisoners are tasked with gathering more tomatoes and walnuts, which are used to supplement their rations. Around mid-afternoon, they receive orders to return to squadron headquarters, where they regroup and learn they will be moving inland to link up with the main British forces. Before setting off, the men share stories of the previous day's events. The captured Italian troops number around 500, with another 200 enemy soldiers believed killed or seriously wounded. They have also rescued over 50 glider troops. Despite their success, one incident stands out: a prisoner who pretended to surrender before throwing a grenade, severely injuring a British soldier. Maine had swiftly shot the Italian, ending the situation. The prisoners seem eager to be captured. In one instance, they even helped a guard who had accidentally dropped his magazine. In another, Italians who had escaped capture earlier snuck back to join the prisoner column, preferring the certainty of captivity to the unknown dangers of freedom. By early evening, they set off on their march inland. The formation is loose, as they believe all significant resistance has been dealt with. The route takes them past the second battery and through a valley lined with hedgerows. Suddenly, anti-aircraft fire erupts, and they stop to watch a dramatic scene unfold overhead. 12 enemy bombers are intercepted by Spitfires, their tight formations scattered. They see several enemy planes shot down, their smoking wrecks spiraling to the ground. Continuing their march, they come across the wreckage of more gliders and the body of a British soldier. Maine leads the Special Raiding Squadron westwards, spending the night at a farm called Luogo Ulivo. This location is approximately 900 meters from the highway, where the Special Raiding Squadron is expected to link up with the main force. Fires are lit, sentries posted, and they eat a rough meal before bedding down in ditches with armfuls of straw. The cold bites through their thin blankets, making sleep elusive. In the early hours, they are woken by another enemy air raid targeting the fleet. Anti-aircraft fire and the roar of engines fill the air as they watch from their ditches. As dawn breaks, they get up, eat a quick breakfast, and pull off ticks and other pests picked up during the night. Marching again, they reach the main road and watch columns of British tanks rumbling inland, a heartening sight that signals the invasion's progress. They settle in a field to rest, exploring a nearby farmhouse that turns out to have belonged to a fascist, now abandoned. Chickens and turkeys are caught and roasted over open fires. The Special Raiding Squadron joins the main force the following morning, on July 11th, 1943, nearly a day later than originally planned. On the morning of July 12th, 1943, they receive orders to return to the HMS Ulster Monarch, now at Syracuse Harbor. As they march towards the town, they see signs of the recent battle, ditches filled with discarded equipment, and, occasionally, a decomposing corpse. They cross a large bridge that had been the glider troops' main objective. Only 2 gliders had landed near the target, and the men wonder what acts of heroism had occurred there during the fight for the bridge. They speak with the rescued glider troops, who are angry about their poor briefing and the inexperience of the American pilots, whom they blame for dropping them too far from the target. Whether true or not, it is clear that the glider operation had suffered from poor planning and inexperience, leading to heavy losses. Reaching Syracuse just before 10 o'clock in the morning, they find the town in disarray, almost deserted, with shattered buildings and streets strewn with debris. They are taken aboard a ferry craft, fed and transported out to the HMS Ulster Monarch, anchored offshore with the rest of the fleet. In 36 hours, they destroy 18 large guns, mortars, and machine guns, capturing over 500 prisoners and inflicting 200 casualties. The Special Raiding Squadron loses Corporal Caton with 2 others wounded. Their mission covers 40 kilometers in 18 hours, often outnumbered 50-1. Paddy Mayne and his men have proven that surprise, skill, and sheer force of will can turn the tide in even the most daunting missions. But as the war marches forward, the Special Raiding Squadron knows the cost of victory will only grow steeper. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Special Forces in World War II. If you enjoyed the story of the Special Raiding Squadron, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and tune in next time as we uncover more daring operations from the world's most legendary special forces. Your support helps us continue to bring you more stories of courage, daring, and the unsung heroes of the Special Forces of World War II. Be sure to tune in next time as we dive into yet another remarkable operation that helped shape the outcome of the war. Until then, keep your wits sharp, your courage steady, and remember, sometimes the most incredible victories come from the unlikeliest of places. This is Michael Wires signing off from the Special Forces in World War II podcast. See you in the next episode. And that concludes this mission briefing, fellow warriors of knowledge. We've navigated through the trenches of information, delving deep into the battlefields of history. As we wrap up this episode in our campaign for understanding, remember that knowledge is your most potent weapon. Stay vigilant and keep sharpening your intellectual arsenal. We'll rendezvous again for another episode, continuing our relentless pursuit of enlightenment. Until then, keep your mind sharp, your curiosity burning, and your determination unwavering. Simultaneously, you are hereby alerted to our outposts on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, fortifying our information dissemination. Should you possess any pertinent intelligence to bolster our mission, transmit your findings with no hesitation. Your contributions shall be prominently acknowledged within the operational archives. Furthermore, for those prepared to provide substantial reinforcement, navigate to our Patreon forward base and enlist. Your support is integral to sustaining our forward thrust. Carry forth the legacy. Dismissed.